Hey cousins, I'm Shemaya. It's like papaya, except it's not, and this is Plot Twist Please. Let's get into it. You ever have a friend you swore would be in your wedding, and now you don't even follow each other on Instagram? This one's for you. Bridesmaids. It's a film about ever-changing friendship and fear of change. It gave us memorable quotes, but most of all, this movie reminds us that friendships are fluid. We like things that are structured. We like definitive answers. No ambiguity, please. But that's not how it works. If you need help coping, don't worry. That's what this episode is all about. But before I get into that, this is a podcast where I talk about movies and mental health. It's for the sensitive movie lovers and self-help deep divers. A sensitive neurodivergent glow-up guide, if you will. It's all coming from a neurodivergent Black woman perspective. So if you like us, you're in the right place. I post main channel episodes Fridays and Mondays. I'm also starting a series called The Soft Spot, where I help you manage those quirky feelings of yours, but in a bite-sized kind of way. Sub to the channel, follow along on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and comment on there. Have you had water today? Okay, we gotta talk about the current friendship crisis going on. In case you don't know, we are in a recession. Yes, a financial recession, but also a friendship recession. Now, what is a friendship recession? Well, come on over to my mental library. A write-up by Carolyn Bruckman of the Harvard Review describes the friendship recession as something permeating Western culture, particularly American culture, resulting in the amount of people who report that they have no close friends skyrocketing since 1990. Now, at the same time, people reporting having close friends has fallen, not twofold, but threefold. I know. And you know what I'm thinking while we're here? I'm thinking that this is more than us being quarantined for over a year. And guess what? The Harvard University happens to agree with me. Yeah. She reads, apparently between 2014 and 2019, the amount of time we spent hanging out with our friends has almost been cut in half. That was BC, before COVID. So what is the deal? Why haven't we been going to the mall like they did every episode of Lizzie McGuire? That one's for the homies. You know who you are. Well, with less government investment in third spaces, the gig economy rising in popularity to keep up with financial costs of being alive, making free time a luxury, really, cultural emphasis on the nuclear family, and one's occupation becoming the sole indicator of one's personhood, yada, 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 and a partridge in a pear tree. Basically, all of these things add up to, if you do the arithmetic, to a result that is honestly not surprising. Not to me. Now, the facts are the facts. America isn't built for single people who, in layman's terms, want friends. It's structured for couples and family units who want the nuclear family structure of a mom and a dad, and maybe two of you work, but we're barely set up for that if you ask me. If you know, you know. So we talked about on a structural level why friendships are fading, or the structure of friendships, the way that they used to be, isn't as widespread, if you will. Now let's talk about why on an interpersonal level friendships are fading. No. Oh, y'all, my guitar almost fell. It's okay, this one's broken. I have another one. But yeah, this one's cute, so it's for the social media. But anyway, I'm going to put my professor cap back on. Now, as a privileged person who has access to lots of things, look, I consider it my mission to make sure my audience reads. But I'll lay off. But the professor hat will be back. That being said, it's not your fault if friendships leave much to be desired. As an autistic person, look, I have found that even if you are around other neurodivergent people or autistic people, it doesn't matter. It's still hard to socialize. There's still some effort required either way. Now, when you're friends with neurotypical people, there's much more effort required. Like, it's like reps before you go into those social environments. You got to maybe practice some greetings. You ever been there where you practice your greetings in the mirror? The real ones know what I'm talking about. Interjecting at the right moments in a group conversation, not speaking too loudly, not speaking too softly, understanding the joke, knowing how often to text, knowing when you should check in, when you shouldn't, figuring out when someone is trying to blow you off. But then when the friendship fades, you think it's because you didn't show up enough. These are all things that autistic people have to think about and have to navigate in order to have fruitful friendships with neurotypical people. It's a travesty. I gotta say, no neurodivergent person has left a friendship with a neurotypical person unscathed, or someone who's not autistic. It can just be really hard. Nothing against them. They're cool. I can vibe with them. We can vibe. It's just they don't really say what they mean a lot of the time, because it's not a homogenous way to socialize. And that leaves autistic people to kind of sift through the clues like Sherlock Holmes and have to rely on pattern recognition and reading in between the lines to navigate a conversation or a relationship. And I will say, having to figure out whether someone actually likes you, who is friends with you, is exhausting. Now, another pattern I've come to find as an autistic adult who now has really solid, reciprocal, intimate friendships is that many of us neurodivergents blame ourselves when things go wrong. So let's talk about why we do that. Why do we blame ourselves when things go haywire? Many of us at this point have learned to become hypervigilant, unfortunately. Ooh, let's visit my library again. We love a library. Now, when someone is hypervigilant, they are constantly on alert. They're looking to the left, they're looking to the right, they're making sure they look all 4 ways before crossing the street. So hypervigilance is an elevated state of constantly addressing potential threats around you. No living, no laughing, no loving for the hypervigilant homies, okay? And will my fellow hypervigilant homies please stand up, because I am with you. I am with you. Here's what happens. We try being social and then we do something wrong. And then no one tells us what we're doing wrong because they don't want to hurt our feelings, and, probably for other reasons too. Maybe because they want to protect their image of themselves, the social order of things, or what others think of them. It's mostly that, to be honest. If I'm being super honest, it's mostly people trying to protect what other people think of them. Not what the autistic person thinks of them, but what people who know the autistic person think of them, who they are also connected to. It's a whole groupthink kind of thing, where they want to be perceived as a good person to other people, regardless of how their behavior affects the autistic person they're in proximity to. And I'm not saying that's everybody's shtick. I'm not saying that's how every cookie crumbles, but I have tried my fair share of cookies, and they all seem to crumble very similarly. It's to not be about the person who you're hurting. It tends to be about people viewing you as someone who hurts people. That's kind of where inspiration porn comes in, and yada, yada, yada. You see the congruence there. You see how it all kind of feels the same. It's all from a similar food group. You dig? And the thing is, when you're an autistic person and no one has ever told you what you've done wrong, you're just expected to know, you start thinking that everything you're doing is wrong, or the things that you're most insecure about are wrong, whether that's true or not. For the sake of protecting the social order, you kind of just fade into the background because you don't want to, it's not really a thing to ask your friend what you did wrong for them to ignore you. It's not really it's not common practice to do that. That's unfortunate, but it's hard to get an answer. And I think part of the reason why it's hard to get an answer too is because a lot of people, non-autistic people, view autistic people as fragile birds, rather than a full-fledged human who is capable of human things, comprehending and taking ownership of harm. Well, fellow humanoids, what happens next is something you can probably predict. Because no one tells us what we did wrong, we make up our own reasons. Like I said before, oftentimes these reasons are not accurate, but they are all we have to go off of. And this is why I hate ghosting, unless you feel like the person you're ghosting is making you feel unsafe. That's the caveat, right? But this is why I hate ghosting, is it's a very selfish approach. It is not about the other person. It is completely about the ghoster. It is completely about the person who is avoiding confrontation. And you can't convince me otherwise. You can't convince me that people who are ghosting people, either romantically or platonically, genuinely care about the other person. They're ghosting because they don't care. They don't care enough to give that person a response or an explanation. And that's why they're doing it. You can't convince me those people aren't selfish. I'm sorry. Unless you feel like you're unsafe, you cannot convince me you were doing that for the person you're ghosting. It doesn't, I like math. I like numbers, and the numbers aren't adding up. So since autistic people are going off of these made up reasons as to why someone no longer speaks to us, I think we end up a lot of the time having this self-fulfilling prophecy of rejecting people before they get a chance to reject us, or becoming more visibly desperate for connection. Now, attachment styles, man, those psychologists really cooked on that. They were doozy. Unhealthy attachments, in this case, become our blueprint for connecting with other people. Literally yikes central, literally so unbecoming. I think a lot of autistic people in general are also used to being, in a way, a friend group pet. You're really not part of the group if you're the friend group pet. You've just kind of been tagged along there as like an extra side dish, or, people hang out with you because you're nice enough. Or maybe you barely talk because group settings are really stressful for you. But you're pretty, so you get by. That's the thing about autism and pretty privilege. You're adopted into a friend group that secretly hates you, but likes the idea of being around your face. Your face. Side note, sometimes I think about how I used to be, pretty face with no words coming out of it. No sense of self. Neon arm warmers, dark eye makeup, composition notebook, wrote poetry for fun. Yeah, that was me. The type. And I think to myself, I never bothered anybody. What kind of person, respectfully, peace, praying for peace, love, and prosperity. But what kind of person do you have to be to take advantage of someone like that? Like, how twisted in the cranium do you have to be to look at someone who clearly doesn't know how to socialize, clearly doesn't know how to defend themselves, but has something you want to use and commodify for your personal gain, and then to just do it anyway, knowing it will hurt them? Oh my God. It's okay. I'm back. The evolved person in me wants to remind you that people are allowed to be human. People are allowed to make mistakes when they themselves are incomplete. But just as people are allowed to be stupid and mean, I'm allowed to be mad about people being stupid and mean. Wow, I needed that. That was nice. I also want to remind you that there's nothing you can physically do to stop someone from disrespecting you. And I hate this. I talked about this a little bit on the Soft Spot, which is like the mini series I have going on the podcast for like those daily doses that you need of self-help. The thing that bugs me about this rhetoric about like, well, if you are confident, if you show that you're no nonsense, then these people won't pick on you. Like, yeah, sure. But also, they were going to pick on somebody else if it wasn't you. They were going to find somebody else in the room to pick on. Them picking on you is who they are. That's who they are, not who you are. Them finding the weakest person in the room, the person who's the most defenseless, and deciding to pick on that person, or deciding to commodify that person, or use that person, or deceive that person. They are showing their colors, and they would have done that whether you were in the room or not. They would have found somebody else to do it to. So they just are that way. They didn't become that way because you were there, because you exist. They would have found someone else to bear the brunt of their ire, of their violence. You do not bring violence upon yourself. Sometimes you just get caught in the crossfires. Because we get really into like victim blamey territory. We start talking about how if autistic people defended themselves, then people wouldn't pick on them, or people wouldn't be mean to them, or people wouldn't try and commodify them. Because in a lot of cases, autistic people don't get the opportunity to exercise those self-defense muscles. We don't get the opportunity to learn how to speak up for ourselves, because what we learn is that speaking up for ourselves gets us fired. Speaking up for ourselves makes us ostracized, gets us excommunicated, makes us not fun to be around, makes people avoid us. So we learn to be pleasant, and we learn to be complacent in order to get through the day, in order to make it through high school, right? I would like to remind you that speaking up for yourself, or rather the lack of the ability to speak up for yourself, doesn't just happen in a vacuum, doesn't just happen on its own. Odds are, if someone struggles to speak up for themselves, it's because they were never allowed to in the first place. That's neither here nor there. I'll leave that as it were. Now, what we can do, girlies, what we can do, homies, is stand on business once we see it. But what does that even mean? Standing on business, what does that even mean? And when you're a minority especially, what does that mean? What does that mean in a room full of people who won't defend you when you're telling someone to stop what they're doing, when you're telling someone to stop bullying you? What does that mean in a room full of people who won't back you up? Does it mean a physical action? Does it mean using a specific set of words? Does it mean screaming? Does it mean... That's the thing, too, is a lot of people don't have tools to disrupt the social script in order to get the attention of people who can help them, or in order to make their grievances known, because we're still learning that language. We're still learning what it means to hold people accountable and to speak up when we've been harmed. We're still figuring out the nuts and bolts of that. And so I think we can give people grace when they don't exactly speak up for themselves, or stand up for themselves, or advocate for themselves in the perfect way. Even grown adults don't know how to do that. There still aren't perfect mechanisms for equipping people to be able to do that in the workspace. And for even the path to retribution, the path to holding people accountable and serving consequences, that is still really murky for grown people, for the Supreme Court even. And I think that's where a lot of the anger comes in when you realize someone bullied you a long time ago, is you realize you had no way to defend yourself, or maybe you had a way to defend yourself, you just didn't know how. Now, back to friendships, even though for some of us, especially if you're an autistic person who went through autistic girlhood, for some of us, bullying and friendship are within the same subject matter. I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sorry for you. And me. It's fine. It's not, but it's fine. For some of us, though, the story isn't you were in a friend group that bullied you, or you had a friend who was a bully. For some of us, the story is we were ignored, or we didn't have close friendships and didn't know how to curate them. But you do not have to let that determine your future. You don't have to let your friendships of the past determine how you go about your friendships now. Now, how do we curb this? What are the next steps? So, like most things, there is a formula to friendship. Studies show the following pillars: duration, or the amount of time you spend together; proximity, so the literal and metaphorical distance between you and your friend; intensity, which consists of vulnerability, meeting your essential needs, being there for significant life moments like weddings, funerals, and baby showers, experiencing those deep emotional connections and being there for those huge life moments. And then frequency, how often you connect in general, like whether it's every week, every other day, that part. So the article I'm referencing by Zoe Nicole also lists things like political views, values, geography, senses of humor, and things like that as contributors to how friendships develop. And I'll link that. I'm making like a personal library. I'll probably link the whole library. There's a part in the article that talks about how you have friends and then you have real friends. But I'm gonna keep it a buck. Do you think that in the midst of all of this chaos, I have the stamina, the mitochondria, the nervous system to have friends who aren't actually friends? I listen, my dear, I forgot to feed myself. I forgot to feed myself today. Not didn't have time to. Forgot I had a human flesh body, because sometimes I forget that. And that's just a Tuesday for me. Like, that's just, don't even get me started on replying to text messages. I am on no one's emergency contact list, and that is for the better. Listen, my loved ones know if the phone call is not on my Google Calendar, it's not happening. It's not happening. If you get kidnapped, do not call Auntie Shemaya. Call 911, then call 5 other people, 5 other kin, then Auntie Shemaya, at least twice. Okay? All right? Y'all hear that? Unless you're, the bestie, and the bestie knows. We just got it like that. Okay. Actually, all right. Backing it up, I do think it's healthy for neurodivergent people to have levels when it comes to our friendships. I just don't think that it is common. I don't think many of us do that naturally. And maybe that's to our detriment, to be honest. My autistic brain, I don't know about you. I don't know about the way that yours cooks, but the way that mine cooks, my autistic brain is very all or nothing. She doesn't do anything halfway. Nothing. Was never going to do anything casually. So I had to train her to take things as they come. I had to say, hey, just because that person came to your birthday party a few years ago, doesn't mean, that they're your ride or die. Maybe they're not even your ride. Maybe there's someone you casually come across in passing. And that's okay. That's all right. I want to remind you that it's not your fault your brain works this way. Neurologically, you are wired to take in and remember more details than the average person. Like, literally, the way neurologically autistic brains are, and I can maybe show a diagram on the video part of the podcast or put a link somewhere, but I watched this video of a neurologist putting up a brain scan of a person's brain who's not autistic versus a person's brain who was autistic. And autistic people just have more receptors. We are receiving more information. We are dissecting more information than the average person. We just are. And so our brains are busy. And in order to organize all that information, our brains have to be very strict. And because our brains are so strict, sometimes that strictness spills over into our relationships. We have to have things all or nothing. We have to, either someone's 100% in our camp or they're 100% against us. This is what our brains do. And that's science. That's not always useful, though, when you're trying to function in your everyday life. It's useful when you're writing a dissertation or when you're teaching a college level course or writing a symphony. Hey, Mozart, how you doing? But not necessarily for balancing relationships. But that's why you're here listening to this. And that's why we're here together. Almost done with this one here, but I want to share a little story with you. I have a bestie who lives in Sweden. And I'm going to plan to fly over to see her soon. That's friendship. Our friendship doesn't look the way everyone else's friendship does, I would argue. And I have a really crazy life, and she knows that. But I'm going to make time to fly over and see her. And she's taken time to fly over to try and see me. And that's just what it is. If you want to stay in contact with someone, you make the time. But I do have to remind myself that socializing is not something that comes naturally to me. I like people. I think people are interesting. But the act of constantly keeping in touch with people as I go about my daily adventures is hard. It takes an extra effort, more discernment, and more patience with myself. So the next time you think to yourself, I have failed my friendship, it is over and it is all my fault. Or whenever you think, I'm terrified that my friend is getting tired of me, or maybe even never liked me in the first place, I want you to know that these are really normal feelings. These are normal thoughts, especially for a neurodivergent person. Now, I want you to do 3 things if these kinds of thoughts come up. Actually, I want you to do this regardless. You have homework, okay? This is your homework. I want you to make a list of the things you enjoy about the friendship, not the person. And this is important because just because they're great doesn't mean they are great for you. So I want you to do that, then write your concerns about the relationship. That can be from, there was this weird energy the last time we were hanging out, to they keep exhibiting behaviors that I think are selfish. Okay. And I want you to take special note of the things that concern you that come up more than once, that are habitual things about this person or about your time with them. You definitely want to highlight those. The second thing I want you to do after that is I want you to circle the things that you can control. So if you can have a conversation with this person about something, that's great. That should be circled because that's something that you can directly aim at, but you can't change them. I do want you to understand that. You can't change people. You can communicate when a behavior doesn't work for you, but you can't make them change who they are. The things you circle on that list are the things that you are going to need to communicate with them. And that's if you care about the relationship. Now, the last thing I want you to do is write down the kind of person you want to be. If you want to be someone who is kind, I gotta tell you, you need to be around kind people. If you want to have integrity, you need to be around people who have integrity. And if you want to speak up for yourself more, want to be more confident, you need to spend time around people who pull that out of you. You need to spend time around people who want you to be outspoken, who like the confident version of you, who don't try to crush you. I know it seems self-explanatory, but it's not. You cannot bloom in dry soil. You cannot grow and meet your full potential in an environment where people don't want to see you grow, or they don't want to see you at all. You can't become your fullest self in an environment that isn't invested in you becoming that. And I want to be so clear about this. These people might not necessarily be bad people. They might be great. They might have great futures ahead of them. They might be wonderful to be around. They might be, great. But they just aren't going to help you become who you need to be. Do not feel guilty for protecting the sanctity of your environment. Because frankly, let me just tell you something. If you don't protect your comfort, this world is going to bulldoze over you. It is going to run you raggedy left and right. There are organizations, of course, there are foundations, people who are trying to do good work in supporting us, sure. And we love them for that. But if you are disabled, you have to prioritize your mental, physical, and emotional health. That is a priority for you. Before we get carried away, because I know that some people are going to be weird, and I like balance, here's what I did not say. Forget everyone. It's every man for himself. And everyone else can choke. We live alone. We die alone. That is not what I said. That's not what he said. Nobody said. Nope. But let's specify. You have to prioritize yourself, but in the same vein, your community can be the difference between you surviving and you thriving, to be honest. Or maybe even from you surviving and not surviving. Communities are fulfilling and people need people. And mental health, say it with me, is a community effort. Yes, good. Keep that in mind. So I leave you with one final thought on this sunny day. If you're bad at friendships, it's probably not your fault. Healthy relationships, I hate to say it, are a luxury. Yeah, being mentally and emotionally sound and physically sound, which all, kind of work together, is hard. But being emotionally and mentally sound enough to show up as your full self and also be able to offer something to someone else, that's not an easy feat. But if we remember that mental wellness is more of a winding path than a location or destination, I think we're going to be okay. Well, that's all I have for you today. If this helped you or made you think, feel free to comment below. Thanks for being here. Be blessed. Stay weird. Bye-bye.